Up until my parents died, I was never considered myself a survivor. I was a child survivor. When we had the Yom HaShoah ceremonies, they're the ones that went up as survivors, and I went up as child of a survivor. Because theirs was more survival than mine.
Tell me about your earliest memory.
Oh, my very earliest memory was in the DP camp, really. I was in a hospital. I spent a year in the hospital in Vienna.
And you were how old?
About 2 years old, maybe 3. I had come down with TB because of the camps. And I was there for a year. And then from there we went to Abelsburg DP camp. And I really don't remember much of anything there. The next thing I really remember is being in Bremerhaven and finding our names on a list to go to the U.S. I was supposed to go to Israel, but I was excluded because of my health. And I remember.
And were your parents in camps?
Yes.
Which camp?
Well, not in camps, okay. My father was in the Polish Army. At the time that Germany attacked, he was in the artillery unit, and he was on the front lines. His unit lasted the whole 27 days that Poland did. He was captured by the Germans, escaped, captured again by the Germans, escaped again. Got back home. 2 of his sisters were missing, more or less, but he knew that they had headed east. And we had some relatives further east, so he went looking for them. This was a matter of traveling by night, staying up during the day. And he did find them, but about the same time that he found them, he got captured by the Russians and interned in Russia. My mother was the same kind of thing. She was a news photographer in Poland, and she was on vacation in Zakopane when they heard that the Germans had attacked, and immediately, not even going home, she immediately got on a train and headed east. How they got to about the same place, I don't know. But my father was a baker, so his skills were really needed. My mother sharpened saws for people cutting down trees for the Trans-Siberian Railroad. And they got together there and were married. I was born in Russia. My father had been given orders to go back to Poland for the Warsaw Uprising, and somehow managed to stay on a little bit longer until I was born. As soon as I was born, he had to leave, but instead of going to Warsaw, he went somewhere else, got some things organized. My mother and I escaped on sleds that winter through, I guess, the south of Russia into Czechoslovakia, and then back up into Poland, long enough to get organized and escape to Austria. At that time, of course, it was still under the German occupation. And, I don't remember that, but I do remember, my mother telling me about how, the Germans would come in one side of the building and they were running across the roof on the other side of the building. And I guess that probably went on for 6 or 8 months until liberation. I think Austria was probably liberated a little bit later than the rest of the camps. And from there, we were already in Austria, so we were in the DP camps there. My sister was born in Salzburg in '47.
Were you the firstborn?
I'm the firstborn.
So Mincy was born in '47.
Yeah.
She's still alive?
Yes.
Living where?
Montreal.
Oh, okay. What brought you to Tennessee?
We, unlike most refugees, we didn't come in through New York. We didn't get to see the Statue of Liberty. We came in through Port of New Orleans.
Okay. And how old were you then?
I was 5 and a half.
So where, were you born in a DP camp?
No, I was born in whatever prison camp, or whatever you want to call it, in Russia. And it was pretty far east. I mean, it's not even considered part of the USSR. Actually, it's ASSR, the Autonomous Soviet Socialistic Republics. So it's actually fairly far east, just north of the Tatar Republic. A little town called Arda, which I actually found on the map. And that was even close because my father, like everybody else who could afford to be in a position to do things, he was a baker, so he would short bread just a little bit, each loaf just a little bit, and that would make up a few loaves extra that he'd trade the bread for butter, and the butter for cheese, and the cheese for meat, and the meat for vodka, whatever. Whatever they could trade for. And he got turned in by somebody, and he was scheduled to go to trial and would have been hung or shot or whatever, except that the judge that was supposed to hear the case got sick, and the judge that actually did hear the case was one that he had dealings with. So he managed to get out of it. And so my father got sent back first. We came in on sleigh train, and even that was risky because it was horse-drawn sleds, and at one point the horses stopped and just laid down for 3 days because of a pack of wolves coming through. My mother had hidden me in one of the sleds between packs of blankets, whatever. Got to the next village and went around searching. She went around searching for some milk for me, and eventually found some. But it's this. I have a real hard time with people saying they don't know what's going on. They didn't have anything to do with things, because some of the stuff was the same stuff that was going on everywhere, earlier and later. I know my mother was telling me one time, she was working for a newspaper as a photographer, and she came home one day, and as she was walking down the streets, this was in Poland, as she was walking down the street to her house, she noticed that it was unusually quiet, and that all the houses around had crosses in the windows. So she got scared. She went upstairs to her apartment and immediately took some adhesive tape and put a cross on the window. Just very shortly after that, people came through, and the people downstairs that were Jewish were killed. Other Jews on the street were killed, and they had left the houses with the cross in the window alone. This was well before the war started. People don't remember the pogroms that happen in Russia and Poland every 30, 40 years, when they'd come through and just kill people, take off whole villages. I was looking through a timeline of things like this, going all the way back in history, and it doesn't matter. Every 40, 50 years, well, I won't say like clockwork, but going back hundreds of years, every 40, 50 years, there was some massive extermination. And, and the Polish people weren't any better than the Germans. Obviously, you did have some people that did help, but by and large, I don't think so.
What brought you to Tennessee?
We were scheduled to go out to California, but this was 1950. We landed in New Orleans on February 3rd, and I remember that very well because that's also the same day I went into the Army here. We landed in New Orleans. We were scheduled to go out to California, and this was in 1950. And I don't know. My father said something about the floods, but that was also about the same time that Korean War was starting up. So I don't know if it was because of the Korean War or because of other flood problems out there. We couldn't go to California. My father got a job offer here. He was a baker, like I said. And so we said, we'll come here. He worked in a bakery right down on, at that time it was 9th Street, part of MLK, somewhere where Gold Gateway is now. But that was a very thriving Jewish community in there. I mean, not only did they have a kosher bakery, they had a kosher butcher shop and everything else. And I can still remember going by and seeing the chickens hanging in the windows. And I still remember my mother using the chicken heads, beaks, and feet
My grandmother
to make a
ground
soup.
Same thing.
Yeah.
You said you were in the Germany with the Army in 68?
67, 68, 69.
Where in Germany?
I was stationed initially in Würzburg, and then when we got kicked out of Nancy, France, I went to Worms with COMZ headquarters. And
I was born in Augsburg
okay,
in 68.
yeah, I know where
There when
that
my
is.
dad was there.
And you know, it was strange. I mean, to a certain extent, people were friendly. To a certain extent, you could still tell there was just something there, and maybe it was my own paranoia. But I mean,
How was it? 25 years earlier, they were scooping Jews up off the streets.
yeah,
There you are, 25 years later. It's not that long ago.
I know that's just it. But it wasn't just that. I mean, you know, I had a lot of German friends, younger people. I studied at the University of Würzburg for a while, just learning German, and made friends. And you know, as far as I know, they didn't know I was Jewish, and I didn't say anything. But I don't know. There was still something there that I didn't like. Even though people were friendly and I got along fine, there was still something there with them. Not so much that I didn't like Germany. I mean, there's still people I know that, you know, refuse to buy a Volkswagen or a Mercedes or anything that has to do with Germany.
My grandparents.
Yeah, and it wasn't that kind of a paranoia. It was just something that you felt all around.
Something just wasn't right.
Würzburg was a tough area. Würzburg was one that they hung some British pilots off the city gates, and the British firebombed the city. The only thing they left standing was about 3 or 4 churches.
You were in the Army?
Mm-hmm. So, you know, even if people were friendly, you know, they had to have the same kind of negativism towards you because of that situation. So I don't know. Like I said, I never, of all the people I met and older people that I met through their kids and stuff, never found anybody that served on the Western Front. It was amazing.
That was amazing.
Yeah. So I don't know, but we got to Germany. We got to Bremerhaven. I don't even know how we got to Bremerhaven, but I do have some unusual pictures too, which y'all might be interested in. My mother, like I said, was a professional photographer, and she made her living in the camps as a photographer. And one of the things that she took some photographs of, and as far as I know, it's the only pictures that exist, was in Abelsburg after the war. They took urns of ashes from each of the camps in glass coffins, and they had a funeral ceremony and took the coffins, I think, to Israel for burial. And I've got pictures of that.
Wow. It's amazing.
And as far as I know, that may be the only pictures ever made of that.
What do you tell people when they ask you
About,
what happened?
I really don't say a whole lot. You know, I can tell them what I know. I can tell them what my parents went through. You know, one of the really tough things was watching Schindler's List, because the first thing they show is the ghetto at Krakow when my grandparents were there. My father lost his grandparents, his younger sister. My mother had lost, I don't know, 5, 6 brothers and sisters. Until the day she died, she would not even tell me their names. She refused to say anything, to talk about it at all. She did have a sister that lived, that was in Israel. She died a few years ago. And she had a brother still in Russia, and I know he died.
He was sitting up
Oh,
there. I
yeah,
think he
that's
wandered
it.
off.
He probably did. But his son, my parents and my mother's sister used to still communicate with through a intermediary in Switzerland, not giving him any real evidence. He knew, but I mean, they wouldn't tell him where we were or anything, so that he wouldn't get in trouble, because at that time Russia was still looking at all the mail. Then, about 10 years ago, we got a letter from him that said, it's too dangerous, I've got to go underground. Don't try to get in touch with him. Then about a year or two after that, we got another letter from him.
Oh, excuse
That's
me one
okay.
second.
I wanted to get some information.
Oh,
That's okay.
Yeah.
I'll just tell him I'll call her. Just one second.
I don't want to go and leave you.
No.
So you said your mother was a photographer.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing.
Okay.
I'll tell her I'm doing.
Well, and I sort of did the same thing. My mother apprenticed me here to Klein's photo studio when it was up on 8th Street.
Huh.
And so for nothing more than maybe 50 cents a day, just enough to get a chili and a hamburger, I learned how to do pretty much everything. I learned how to, make the pictures, make the blow-ups, develop the pictures, dry them. I learned to set up the big cameras. I learned how to do retouching. I even learned how to do remember the old oil painting on black and whites?
Yeah.
They were still doing that.
But she worked as a photographer in the camps.
Yeah, in the DP camps.
Doing portraits,
Doing anything,
Whatever.
portraits, scenery. I've still got a few of the pictures that she did. Of course, most of them were lost coming over. I do remember on the boat coming over, I remember the lifeboat drills.
And how old were you then?
I guess I was about 5.5 then.
And you remember those?
I remember those. I remember them throwing the body overboard and then doing the lifeboats. I remember one time when they had it set up very much like a dormitory. I mean, they had women's areas and they had the men's areas, and the men and women were basically separated. So I was visiting my father one day when they had a lifeboat drill, and I didn't have my life vest because it was with my mother. So I stayed behind. Not a good idea.
No, probably not.
the ship that we came over on sank on the return voyage off the coast of Africa.
Wow.
So.
Wow.